Hello again, friends, and welcome back for another episode of WVU Energy Express on West Virginia Public Broadcasting and YouTube. As always, I'm your host, Zach Harold. Today, we're back with plenty more STEM fun. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. We'll start things off by putting the finishing touches on something we started earlier this week. We're going to complete our robot hand. Let's check it out.
So, hey guys, if you don't remember from last time, my name is Ethan. I'm a student here at WVU and I work in Paul through 4-H. And last time we made this fun little robotic hand that we could pull the strings on and we could close and open the hand. Maybe you were able to grab something, pick something up with it. Maybe you're able to high-five someone with it. But today we're going to be continuing our lesson. We're going to make it a true robotic hand. We're going to be using a little computer and a little motor to open and close this hand with the push of a button. So before we get started, we're going to go over some of the materials we need. So now we can move on to explaining what all this computing electrical technology is. So this is a microbit. It is a microcontroller, which is basically a mini computer that can help you do single simple tasks around the house. It's super cool. So in here, it has memory. In the back, you can see all the fun electrical wiring. It has memory to store one program at a time. It has a processor to, process the code. It has two input buttons, an A button and a B button. Technically a third input option if you want to press both at once. And then as an output, we have all of these pinholes here, but then we also have an LED screen that can also give an output. And what LEDs are just fun, fancy lights. All right, so now we have went over our microcontroller. Let's go over our little servo motor. So usually when you think of motor, you think of this big thing, usually in a car that goes around and around and around to help give something power. This can also go around and around and around, but the difference between this and a regular motor, this can go two ways. So usually a motor can only go one way. This has some gears in it. It can go left or it can go right. So it's a really cool, simple little mechanism. And then the extensions, these little arms are just two attached to the white part here of the servo motor to help attach other things like, spoiler alert, the strings for our hand right here. So now that we have went over that, we have to actually code our computer so that it can perform things, because on its own, it can't really do all that much. So what we need to do is we need to go onto the internet. I'll open up my laptop here. So I'll just open my internet browser of my choice. I'm going to go to makecode.microbit.org. Press enter. When you get here, I have a few projects on here. You don't need to make an account. You don't need to sign in or anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to press new project. You need to give your project the name. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call it Robo Hand Demo. You can name it whatever you want to. I'm going to press create. So now we're on the screen right here that lets us code the microbit. To the left here, you'll see an image of the microbit. This is kind of a preview of what our code is going to look like. So when we code, we're able to press the buttons A and B here, and if we have any output on the LEDs, we would see it there. To the right here, this is our little, I'm going to call it a studio, because you can move and jive blocks around however you see fit. Kind of like you're making a movie. You're bringing all the pieces together in the little studio. And then over here in the middle, we have some of the coding blocks we're going to use. And we have them sorted in different categories. So we have basic, input, music, LED, radio, loops, logic, variables, math, and extensions. We're not going to be using a lot of this. Obviously, after this lesson, if you want to do more with this, you are more than welcome to search. This website has a lot of good tutorials you can follow that let you learn. So what these are coding blocks. So usually when you think of coding, you usually think someone typing on a computer, like in the movies, like they're hacking or something.
You didn't say the magic word.
This is not that. These blocks are kind of gonna act like puzzle pieces. So as you can see, on the top, there's a little notch that's sticking out, and on the bottom, there's a little notch that's not there. As you can see, when I drag this over and I highlight, it's going to show where this block is going to go, and it's going to snap together just like a puzzle piece. Instead of 0, I'm going to say the number 5. So on start, it's going to show the number 5, just like that. I'm going to press stop, and then when I press start, it's going to show 5. I can change this number to 7, and on start, it's going to show the number 7 now. So that's how the little preview works, and that's just a quick demo on how the blocks work. So what we're going to do is we need to add an extension to this. So we're going to go down to extensions, and right here it says servo, a micro servo library, and it has this big bright green backdrop and a little blue box that kind of looks like our servo motor. That's what we're going to click. It's loading, and as you can see, between radio and loops, there's a new category of servos, and that's exactly what we need. So this on start and forever block, these are our starting event blocks. We're not actually going to be using these, so we can drag them over to the middle column. And as you can see, it glows red and there's a little trash can icon. That's just deleting our blocks. First thing we're going to do, we're going to go to input. We're going to drag out the first block here on button A pressed. So we're going to drag that out just like that. And then we're going to go to servos. And we're going to use this first one under the positional. It says set servo P0 to angle 90 degrees. We're going to drag that out, and we're going to drag it in the middle of the on button A press block. And as you can see, there should be a gray outline of where the block will be. And when I let go of the mouse, it should snap into place. And as you can see on our preview over here, our servo motor was added with some wires connecting the extensions out here, and that's exactly what we want. So we're going to need to change a little bit of this code. So on button A press, instead of 90 degrees, we're going to set it to 0. You can either type it like this, or you can use this little slider out here. So we're just going to set it right to 0. Perfect. So now when button A pressed, it should set to 0. It was already set to 0, so it doesn't look like A is doing anything right now, but I assure you it is. What we're going to do, instead of dragging everything out again, we can right click and say duplicate. So right now it's kind of wireframed, it's not really there almost, and that's because we have 2 on button A press blocks and the code doesn't really like that. So we can press this drop down menu right here. Instead of A, we can say B. And now it changed to the fun pink and green code. We can also change this angle here. We're going to set it to 180. And what we do when we set it to 0 from 180, we take from one side of a line and we take it to the opposite side of the line. So now when I press button A, nothing happens because it's on 0. But when I press button B, it goes all the way around. And you can see I can press both buttons just like that. And as you can see on here, these wires are connected to specific parts of both the microcontroller and the servo motor. Pay attention to that because that's going to be very important, but don't worry, I'll walk you right through it. Now what we need to do is we need to get the code from our computer to our microbit. What we can do is we can use this little USB adapter to plug into our computer in any USB slot. And then we can plug it into our microbit right at the top here. Red light turns on, and that means it is working. And on our computer, a little microbit folder should pop up in your little file explorer. So what we can do, we can minimize this real quick. On our little microbit studio, we can press download. It'll take a minute. It'll say downloaded, which is perfect. So we can do, now I'm going to need to go to my own downloads here. It is a bit confusing when you download it because depending on your computer, you might not know if it's already downloaded to the microbit or if it's in your specific downloads file. We can go ahead and test it though when we connect up all the wires. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we can do, we can go ahead and unplug this because once it is downloaded, it would be stored in its memory. So even when it's unplugged and turned off, the code is still stored in the microbit's memory. Later, we can use this battery pack to turn on our microbit even when it's not plugged into a computer, but we'll get to that later. So now we need our microbit in our servo motor and then our different colored wires. I recommend definitely having different colored wires so you're not confused as to whether this wire goes to this pin or this pin connects to this part of the servo motor. When you have different colors, it is a lot easier to organize your wires. So now we can take our servo motor, and on the screen, if you can see this big circle on the servo motor and then a small circle, that will correlate to how our gears look on the actual servo motor. So this white part that's sticking out, you can see there's a big circle around it and then a smaller circle that's attached to it at the bottom. So we want to keep it at this position as we wire it up. As you can see, there's these different colored wires here. My servo motor has an orange, a red, and a brown. It is extremely important to keep those in line, as if you connect up a wire wrong, your microbit won't recognize that it is connected to the servo motor. So we can line it up with our computer. You can even bring it up to the screen and say, oh, on the preview, the wires will be different colors. So on my preview, I have a purple, a red, and a blue. So they might not exactly correlate to what you have in real life, but that's okay. You just kind of have to keep it in the back of your head. So my orange would correlate to my purple on my screen. My red does correlate to my red on the screen, so that's cool. And then my brown is going to correlate to my blue on the screen. So once we do that, we can set the wire down, or the servo motor down. We can take our microbit. As you can see, on the bottom, there's a 0, 1, 2, 3 volt ground. The 0, 1, and 2 just designate which pin the microbit is getting input from. 3V will power the microbit, and the ground will have a solid ground for the electricity to flow through. So now what we can do, we can take our wires here, connect it to our servo motor to connect it to our microbit. So how we connect all these things is at this black box at the end here. On the edge, it's very, very tiny, but you can see 3 holes here. There's one here, in the middle, and right there. And we can connect the ends of our wires that have these small prongs on them into these holes. So like I said, we have to correlate it. So let's do the 0 first on the microbit. That's my purple, which correlates to my orange on my servo motor. So orange is going to go to white. So I connected my white wire to where my orange wire ends, so on the left of my black box. And then I'm going to take the alligator clip, and if you have not seen these before, you squeeze at the end and the prongs come open and it looks like an alligator trying to chomp at you. So we're going to connect this to our 0 right here, and just like this. So you can connect it like this, as long as the silver part of the alligator clip is touching the gold metal part of the microbit. So there's one wire connected. As you can see, it's this long stretch of wires here. So now let's do the 3 volt, which is the middle wire on the servo motor. I'm going to connect red, since it looks like everything is connected to red from my servo motor. So I'm going to plug my red wire in the middle. Just like that. Sometimes it takes a bit of force, but that's okay. And then I'm going to clamp my alligator head onto a 3 volt of the microbit, just like it tells me on my preview. We have 2 wires. Let's connect the last wire. This should be the easiest, since there's only 1 hole left on the servo motor. And I will clamp this to my ground right here. Green for ground, if you wanted to, remember that. All right, and there we go. Our servo motor is now connected up to our microbit. So if we plug our battery box in, and we plug it in this white end of the battery box, we'll get plugged into this white insert at the top left of our microbit. So top left, it'll be right here. And we can go ahead and plug that in. Again, it might take a bit of force, and then we can turn our battery box on, and when we turn it on, a red light should appear, which is awesome. to have a good indicator if your servo motor is working, we can use some of these little extensions in this bag. What I'm going to do, there's a few here, but I'm going to use the one that has a single arm connected to a little white arm right there. I'm just going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect it onto the white indent of my servo motor. So just like that. So let's see what happens when I press A now. So I can see when I pressed A, it went to the left, and when I pressed B, it goes the other way. A, B. A, 0 degrees, B, 180 degrees. So if you have gotten to this step, congratulations, you have made your first program, and it works correctly. But like I was talking about before, if I didn't know if it would go to my personal computer's downloads folder or right onto the microbit, it looks like it just went directly onto the microbit, so that's really good. And if it's not on the microbit, it will be in your computer's downloads folder. You will just have to move it to the microbit extension that pops up. So after we do that, we're now able to put it all together. We're able to connect all this we just programmed here to our cardboard robo hand. All right, so now we just need to connect our strings to this little arm right here. And this is what More Tape is exceptionally good at. So we want to make sure that all of our strings to our fingers are kind of laid flat so that they have a good pull to them. I'm going to tape the ends of my string first just to make it a little bit easier to connect to the arm. That piece of tape right there. I'm just going to bring these together a little bit. And then I'm going to just wrap some tape around them. Yeah, this is just the easy part here. That tape, and it does not have to look pretty. You can make it look pretty if you want. That would be really cool. But mine, I like functional over pretty. So what I leave you with now, I have given you the basics. What I'm going to leave you is I'm going to give you the challenge to make your robotic hand close properly and then even pick up something. That's the challenge I'm going to leave you. Once again, I've given you the basics here. I hope you both had fun and learned something new. And with that, I'll see you next time.
Next, pack up those spacesuits because we're headed into the cosmos. First, our friend Jennifer is going to lead us through an activity that will teach us how NASA uses parachutes to land objects on celestial bodies like Mars. Ready, astronauts? Because we blast this mission off in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name's Jen Robertson-Honegger, and I'm an associate professor and STEM specialist for WVU Extension. Today we're going to be making parachutes and learning how NASA uses parachutes to land objects on celestial bodies like Mars safely and accurately. Using real images and data generated by NASA missions, we're also going to introduce some of the key characteristics of the Martian surface and how we have discovered these features through decades of scientific exploration. Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun and one of our closest planetary neighbors. Mars is called the red planet because iron minerals in the Martian soil oxidizes or rust, giving it a reddish hue. This can be seen from our planet in the night sky when Mars is out. In this activity, you're going to need the following materials: circle stickers, pencil, a ruler, scissors, paper clips, string, and coffee filters. We're also using the following: landing map cards that talk about the Mars surface, a Mars map, and a scientific reference guide. All of these materials are available for free and are downloadable from the National 4-H website. This activity was adapted from the 2020 Mars Base Camp 4-H STEM Challenge. So let's start the activity. First, you're gonna need one of your coffee filters. Go ahead and flatten that out on the table, and then you're gonna want to fold it in half, making nice creases along the edge, and then folding it in half again, so it looks something like this. Once we've done this, we're going to reopen the coffee filter and we're going to make small marks on those creases at the edge of the coffee filter paper. So you can see here I have 4 marks that are evenly spaced along my coffee filter. And this is important because this is where we're gonna put our string, and it's important that those are evenly spaced and symmetric. So now we wanna create our strings for our parachute. And to do this, we are going to use our ruler, and we want to cut 2 12-inch pieces. Now, if you are working with young children, you'll want to have a caring adult help you cut these pieces ahead of time. Okay, we are now going to secure the string to our parachute or the coffee filter using the circle stickers. So at one of those points, those marks that we made on our coffee filter, we're going to place the end of the string on that mark. I'm going to take one of my circle stickers and I'm going to secure that piece of string down using the circle sticker. Now it's important to use your fingers to really push down well on the coffee filter so it holds that piece of string in place. So you can see I have one piece of string attached to my coffee filter. Now we're going to attach the other end of that string onto the opposite side. So I'm going to do that by going underneath the coffee filter and putting the string on the other side. Again, using my fingers to press down to make sure it's nice and secure. So I have one string attached on 2 opposite ends, and now I'm going to do the same thing with the other piece of string. All right, so you can see from this side, my 4 circle stickers, and from the opposite side, my 2 pieces of string, and they kind of make a crisscross on the other side. So now that we have our strings attached to our parachute, we are going to add a paper clip, and this is going to help us do 2 things. One, we're going to be able to center those strings in the middle of our parachute to create 4 equal lengths. We're also going to be able to add additional paper clips to our parachute as we go forward, and this is going to help us increase the payload. The payload of something is just the number of passengers, cargo, or weight that our parachute's going to carry. To add the paper clip, you simply put your hand underneath of the strings and you're just going to slide that paper clip right over those strings, much like you would a piece of paper, and have that through, and now my paper clip is attached to both strings. And you may need help from a caring adult to be able to do this. Now that I have the paper clip connected to my strings, I want to use one more circle sticker to help keep it in place. And this is also going to help keep those strings very even and symmetrical. It's important that the 4 lengths of strings that we're creating here are nice and even, because that's going to help your parachute fall even and accurately every time. Now that we have our sticker attached, you can see that we have a finished parachute with roughly 4 equal sides, as well as our paper clip, which acts as a payload, and we'll be able to add additional payload as we're testing and launching our parachute onto the Mars surface. In the test phase, we're going to practice launching our parachutes and fine-tune the payload weight. In the launch, orbit, and landing phase, we're going to launch the parachute onto the map of Mars and figure out if we've gone into orbit, had a safe landing, or need to try again. Next, we'll move on to the discovery phase and talk about information on our orbiter and landing site. Finally, in the reflection phase, we're going to consider which of the landing sites would be a good place to potentially send a rover or people to Mars in the future. To test our parachute, you want to take it at arm's length and hold open the coffee filter so the parachute is nice and open. Test it by simply dropping the parachute to the ground. This will likely take several tries. You may notice at first that the parachute doesn't fall very evenly. That's because we need to add some more payload weight. To do this, simply slide additional paper clips onto your original paper clip. Start with 2 and test, and then add additional paper clips until you think you've gotten the right weight. Once your parachute has a nice even fall without deflating, you can move to the next phase. Okay, now that we've tested our parachute and we have a good payload and we think we've got a nice even fall, we're going to try to land our parachute onto the Mars surface. So it's a good idea to stay consistent and make a mark on the floor anywhere from 1 to 3 feet from the Mars map. Just like before, you're going to stand with your arms outstretched and open up the parachute before you let it drop. Now, it may take several tries to actually get your parachute to land on the map. All right, we have a successful landing, and in this case, our parachute has landed in quadrant D2. Once a student has landed on a quadrant, then the next student can take a chance and try to land on a different quadrant. The goal is to hit as many of these different spaces as possible, so then we can sit down and talk about the different features, the geological features on the surface of Mars in those areas. Once all of the youth have had a chance to drop their parachute and land on the map, we can move on to the next phase. So if we look at the map here, we can see there are different quadrants. We've got A through D along one side, and then 1 through 4 along the top. And each of those represents different areas. So for instance, if we look here, this would be quadrant B4. And if we go to our cards, our map landing cards, we can read about the geological features on each of those quadrants. Looking at B4, we can see this is called the Becquerel crater. And this crater it tells us, is 170 kilometers wide and is an ancient impact scar with piles of sediment piled inside its walls. And then it tells us how we know this information, which is going into the history of the NASA missions and how we've collected this data over time. In this particular case, the image was taken by a camera on one of the reconnaissance orbiters, and it shows you the picture of that orbiter, and it also talks a little bit more about what's in that area. Finally, at the end of the activity, you'll want to reflect on all that we've learned. And to do that, you can use the scientific reference guide, which is also downloadable from the 4-H website. In this, you can talk with the kids a little bit more about the types of missions and landers we've sent to Mars, as well as the orbiters that have gone around it. You can talk about some of those features like channels, dunes, and faults that are on the surface. And it also goes into detail on the other side of ice cap, impact craters, and volcanoes. Looking at this information, students should be able to look at the map and really think about where the best sites would be to send future rovers and humans. If time allows at the end of the activity, allow students to make adaptations to their parachute or create an entirely new parachute with a new design. And let students get creative with their designs and see how it compares to their original parachute. Thank you for joining me in this activity. I hope you create your own parachutes and have a lot of fun doing so.
That concludes today's mission. We hope to see you right back here next time for another adventure on WVU Energy Express. Have a wonderful rest of your day.